Alright, so I live in northwestern Pennsylvania, which is a mostly deciduous hardwood forest, and we have 25 acres of woods here, and that's where we will be kind of looking through the trees and the species that you see here. And most of the trees that we'll see are actually going to be oaks and maples. There are lots of beeches, quite a few black cherry as well. But our main trees that you'll see here are the oaks and the maples. We mostly have red maple and red oak, but we do have some white oak and some sugar maple as well, but those are pretty sparse. Now, I am not very good at identifying the differences between oaks and maples in the winter, like it is now, without the leaves, because the bark just looks very similar to me. I'll know when it's an oak versus maple just because of the leaf litter. I'll be able to see, okay, there's obviously more oak leaves here than maple, so it's probably a maple. And a lot of the trees still have those dead leaves on them. So that's the main way I'll be able to identify those trees while I'm showing you all of this, but every other species that I'll show you is pretty identifiable in other characteristics. So we have lots of beech, we have black cherry, we have a few shagbark hickory, we have yellow birch or swamp birch. We have lots of smaller trees like ironwood or American hop hornbeam. And we also have, let me think here, tulip, yellow birch, aspen. Those are very common as well, but again, not as common as the oaks and the maples. So I'm just going to show you how to identify these trees in the wintertime when there isn't any foliage, because the different species do give you lots of different hints. So I'm excited to show you how to be able to identify in the winter. Now, despite not having any leaves in the winter, most species are actually pretty identifiable either by their bark or some sort of characteristic like the terminal bud. So for instance, this here is a beech tree, and it's hard to tell because it has very smooth bark. Even compared to that one, it's kind of hard to tell. But a characteristic of the beech that makes it really, really easy to identify in the winter is actually its terminal buds. So the terminal buds are going to be very, very sharp and pretty long. So here's a good example here. You can see how long that terminal bud is, and when you poke it, it's actually pretty sharp, and it can leave like a little dent in your finger. So even looking at the bark here, and it's pretty easy to tell with the larger beeches, but since this one's smaller, it's a little harder to tell the difference because it does have that, more mossy looking bark. But a really easy way to tell that this is a beech is just by looking at those terminal buds. Basically, this is the only tree in our area that has those really defined sharp terminal buds. The other thing with beech that you'll be able to see, especially in the summer, is the leaves. So this is a beech leaf. It's really, really crinkly, and it's hard to tell because they are all dead and dried, but in the summer, they're very, very paper-like. They're thin, and they don't really snap like you would expect with like an oak or something. And they're very, very crinkly sounding. Okay, so I'm currently next to two actually pretty easily identifiable trees. This first one is called the musclewood or the ironwood. It's got really thin little sticks. You can see how it doesn't really get very thick branched or anything. And then the most noticeable part of it, and when it doesn't have leaves, is actually the bark. So you can kind of see, especially down here, it's got all these kind of striations along the bark, and it's very uneven. It literally looks like someone's muscles, which is why it's called the musclewood. This one's a little harder to see on camera, so if I find another one, I'll show you guys that as well. But you can kind of see like it's divoted and it rises up here and everything. So yeah, that's the musclewood. And if I find a smaller one, I'll show you that as well, because sometimes the smaller ones are even more easily identifiable. But you can definitely see up here along this branch how grooved it is, kind of, but smooth as well. The other tree next to me here is the witch hazel. So the witch hazel is really identifiable because it's usually got a bunch of different stems coming out, and it has a kind of an umbrella shaped canopy, but what's really distinct about them is it usually leans one way. So you can see this one's going all the way over there. There's a couple more growing out this way, but those are growing straight up. But this one's for sure the witch hazel that goes out that way. So you can kind of see it goes like that. And these guys, again, it's a little harder to tell in winter. Usually just the smaller size and the umbrella canopy can help you identify it pretty easily. But if I can find a small piece or a branch here that has them, you can kind of see up there it's got flowers. So witch hazel actually flowers in the fall and winter, and it's got really small little cute flowers. They're yellow, that also make it very identifiable. So that is definitely one, and it looks like this is one as well. Coming out this way. All right, another common tree in our forest is the black cherry. And these guys are really easy to identify because look at how much darker that bark is compared to that tree. And it also has kind of this more flaky bark. It looks a lot like a pine to me, but it's not. It's actually a deciduous tree, and it's a black cherry. In the summer, they will have little black berries to them, which I think are edible, but don't take me up on that. Please don't eat anything unless you're sure it's edible. And yeah, it's very identifiable in winter, especially here, because the black cherry is the only cherry tree that we have, as opposed to, I believe this is an oak. It looks like a red oak. So yeah, you can just tell by looking at that, oh, that's a black cherry. Easy peasy. Right, this is another tree that is common in Pennsylvania, or at least northwestern Pennsylvania. This is the swamp birch, or as I like to call it, the yellow birch. These trees are also very easy to identify in winter because of their peeling bark, and it has more of a yellow tint to it. That might be harder to see on camera, but if you look between those two, that one has a more yellow. These guys are common in more swampy areas. As you can see, that is exactly what this woods are. And yeah, they never really get that big here. There's another one over there, you can see it's a bit bigger than this one. But again, very easy to tell just by their peeling bark that that is a birch of some kind. I know that this is a yellow because that's the kind we have in northwestern Pennsylvania, the most common. Alright, so this little guy is a little white pine. In Pennsylvania, we have white and red pine that are common, and we don't actually have any big ones of these around here. As you can see, it's all pretty deciduous. All of those aren't white pines, those are another kind of pine species. So I'm not really sure where this little guy came from, but he established himself here somehow. And you can actually tell the difference from a white and red pine by looking at the needle bundles. So with a white pine, it'll have a needle bundle of up to 5 needles. So if you count here, this is a needle bundle. If you count, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's how you can tell the difference between a red and white pine. A red pine will actually only have a needle bundle of 2 needles. So if it has any more, it's most likely a white pine, which is what this little guy is. Thriving next to this oak. No idea where he came from. So this is probably one of the largest beech on the property, if not the largest. He's one of my favorite trees. And in the summer, he actually has a bunch of beech aphids. They're also called boogie woogie aphids because they dance. If you get close to them, they're really cute. They look like little fairies to me. But you can see how big this one got. Quite impressive, actually. He's still doing pretty good. If I remember correctly, he's not really struggling that much. He's got quite an extensive root system, which probably helps. But yeah, pretty impressive. He does a good job. Okay, so this bush here is actually really cool. It's called a spice bush. And this is a really big spice bush. Usually they only get to like this high or so, basically, you know, maybe 3 feet, if that. So this one grew really large, and I know this is a spice bush because I found it this summer. And what's cool about spice bush is when you take their leaves and you crush them between your fingers, it smells very lemony, kind of like a peppery lemon smell. It smells so good, and we have them all throughout the woods, and I absolutely love just picking their leaves in the summer while I'm walking through because it smells so good. This is another bush that we have that's very common here in Pennsylvania. It is a silky dogwood, and they're very unique in their color. You can see that it's a dogwood right off the bat just by its dark red color, and it's usually very bushy. It's kind of hard to see in this lighting, but here's one of the twigs here. We can get this to, there we go. So very pretty in the winter as well, very dark in color. I can tell it's a silky dogwood because, well, and you can really tell in the summer, but when you pull apart its leaves, it has almost what looks like silk in it, and it gets like really fluffy. It's really kind of cool. But I'll also show you how you can identify in between here. So I can tell that this is a silky dogwood because it has that orange stripe in between, and it's basically the only one of the dogwood family that does that. Okay, so these things are really cool, and I'm glad I found one because usually I can't in the winter, but these are called beach drops, and as you might imagine, they're right next to beaches a lot, and these guys are actually a kind of parasitic plant. So in the summertime, they're actually kind of a whitish red, and you can see that color is still here, and they've got these teeny tiny flowers. Let me see here. These teeny tiny flowers, there we go, but no leaves. And obviously that's hard to tell in the winter, but they basically look exactly like this in the summer as well. And so it's a parasitic plant that actually shoots its roots into the roots of the beech plant and feeds off of the nutrition that the beech plant or the beech tree brings up. So they're really, really cool and pretty easy to see in the summer. They are pretty small. Here's another one. So as long as you're looking at the ground, you can spot them pretty easily. But very, very cool. And again, they don't have leaves because they are parasitic. They don't need to photosynthesize. So that's very cool. Another very common tree in Pennsylvania is the quaking aspen. And those are those white trees right here. They're very identifiable. They're really only the white trees we have. And they get really big. The cool thing about aspens are that's probably all those trees you see there are actually probably one single organism. They're able to colonize and shoot up roots in different areas. So what you're seeing there is probably one plant, which is just so cool. If you guys have never heard of it, there's Pando, I believe in either Utah or Colorado, and it's the largest living single organism in the world, and it's actually basically one tree. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's one tree that has just shot up for the quaking aspen that has just shot up over, I think it's either 80 acres or 800. I'm not sure which one. I think it might be 80. But yeah, super easily identifiable. You can see how much wider that is compared to that tree there. Even there, that's a aspen, and or even compared to those trees. So you can see how much how much more white they are. Very cool. And they're called the quaking aspen because this is a leaf, because their petiole is actually flattened. You can kind of see that here. It's flattened to allow the leaf to kind of flap in the wind like this. So that's why they're called the quaking aspen, is because it looks like they're actually quaking, which is so cool. Okay, so it's a new day, and I was out in the woods again after it had snowed, and I finally found a shagbark hickory. So a shagbark hickory is pretty darn easy to see because you can see the bark is just falling off of it in these great big strips. So don't mind my dog. Yeah, so very easy to identify in the winter. Basically, once you see that bark, and it doesn't look like just a dead tree with the bark peeling off. I mean, that's pretty apparent. Just shedding of the bark. of a shagbark hickory.